All over the South, people who are not from the South and some who are trying to tear down Confederate monuments. Here in Taiwan, where I live, people are trying to tear down monuments to Chiang Kai-shek and rename places that were named after him. And all over the Middle East, ISIS has been tearing up historical monuments. What's this all about? What is the core issue? In the South and in Taiwan, the core issue is man's inhumanity to man. The argument of the monument destroyers comes down to one thing, and that is that people who are guilty of abusing their fellow man, man's inhumanity to man, should not be honored with monuments or having things named for them. Let's compare things that may be compared. Let's start with Robert E. Lee and Abraham Lincoln. Robert E. Lee was the executor of his father-in-law's estate, which included some slaves. Robert E. Lee himself never owned any slaves. Following the instructions of his father-in-law's estate, he freed his slaves within 5 years of his father-in-law's death. The ones who were fully capable, he freed right away. Those who were less capable, either because of their age or some infirmity or for some other reason, he prepared for emancipation and emancipated them. But let me stress that Robert E. Lee never owned any slaves. Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's wife inherited slaves when her father died. They were Abraham Lincoln's responsibility, and that was the one and only time that Lincoln had the opportunity to personally free some slaves. Apparently he didn't. If he had freed his wife's slaves, it would have been in his interest to save a copy of the manumission papers. No such papers exist. If he had sold the slaves instead, it would have been in his interest to destroy copies of the bill of sale as soon as he could reasonably do so. To this date, no one has come up with the manumission papers or any bills of sale. Apparently, Abraham Lincoln sold the slaves. Now let's compare Jefferson Davis with the Union General William Tecumseh Sherman. Both of them were slave owners. During the war between the states, when Sherman was capturing territory, supposedly freeing slaves, he freed some, but if they were able-bodied men, he forced them to work for the Union Army. They worked with pay, but it was still involuntary servitude, the very definition of slavery, and the pay they received was less than what the whites received. So not only was William Tecumseh Sherman a slave owner, he added to his slaves on behalf of the Union Army. Now we look at Union General Grant and Confederate General Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson never owned any slaves. He was against slavery. His purpose for fighting was to defend his native Virginia. General Grant's wife owned slaves, and Grant had the legal right to free the slaves. He didn't. After the war was over, Grant was asked why he didn't free his slaves, and he said, because good help is hard to find. Now, if opposition to slavery is a reason for tearing down monuments to people who fought in the war between the states, then Stonewall Jackson's monument should remain up and Ulysses Grant's should be torn down. Only 2 northern states did not have slaves: Vermont, which never had slavery, and Pennsylvania, which outlawed slavery outright. In the other northern states, they had grandfather clauses which protected slave owning where it existed. So how do we decide which monuments to tear down or rename and which ones should remain as they are? I have a couple of ideas on that. One is the people who directly suffered at the hands of the people who were being honored, or who were members of the immediate family of those who suffered, can decide whether to tear down a monument or rename it. Let's see how that one would play out. Remember that the core issue here is man's inhumanity to man, the arbitrary use of power to abuse innocent people. There are at least 19 schools named after Barack Obama. 4 of those schools could be named after Christopher Stevens, Glenn Doherty, Tyrone Woods, and Sean Smith, because those are victims of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, of course. Other schools could be named after the bride and groom of the Pakistani wedding party that was killed in a drone strike ordered by Barack Obama. And still others can be named after some of the many other people who were killed by Barack Obama. Bill Clinton Boulevard and the William Jefferson Clinton Presidential Center and Park can be renamed. Kind of hard to find a name for them. Maybe they could be named for Juanita Broderick, Paula Jones, Kathleen Willey, or any of his other victims of sexual harassment or rape. Then there's the Bill and Hillary Clinton National Airport in Little Rock, Arkansas. That one has just got to be named after Kathy Shelton. It can all get rather complicated trying to figure out which monuments to tear down or rename and which to keep as they are. So I propose a simple solution here. Remember, the core issue is man's inhumanity to man, the arbitrary use of power to abuse someone else. So it should be or could be decided by a commission of people who have never abused another person. Any volunteers for that commission? I didn't think so. This is Jerry Mills. Good day.